Hey, hey, welcome back to Acres of Faith. It's Sunday, October 6th, and you're probably wondering why I haven't posted in a while. Luckily, our business in town, whoops, sorry for the shakiness, has been just that, super busy, and it's a very good thing. But today, I'm trying to put my feet up and spend some time with God, so I got some praise music going, and trying not to work too hard, but yet keep things rolling since it's a day that I'm actually home. What I'm doing, actually, I'll flip the phone around for you in just a second, although it's not that exciting. But here we go. I'm going to try it anyway. See if I can get it around. So I've got some tomatoes cooking. I just put them in a big roaster, and I've never used the plastic liner before when I do it. I don't know. You're not supposed to microwave in plastic and all of that, and so I just wonder if the toxins from the plastic leach out or not. I don't know. I'm trying not to be super paranoid, but anyway, I've got these beautiful tomatoes here cooking up in the roaster, and I'm just about to add a bunch of spices and other seasonings. So I'm going to grab that recipe, and I'll type it in the comments so you can see it. But I got this recipe from my friend Michelle years ago, and have used it ever since. It's loosely what I do. I just kind of dump. Sorry that I'm shaking. Or the phone is shaking. So I just use a whole bunch of tomatoes, and then I kind of start dumping this stuff in, and then depending on how I feel like it tastes, because each batch of tomatoes tastes different, then I adjust accordingly. So anyway, this says it makes about 9 pints, and mine, it probably makes about 9 pints, but like I said, I end up kind of doubling it and just adding a bunch of stuff. So in the oven at the moment, I have a whole bunch of honey, and I have it turned down really, really super low. The reason that I've got the honey in here is because I was at the end of a 5-gallon bucket, and I spoke with our local beekeeper the other day. He's the son of a very good friend of ours, and he is just so wise about this stuff. Anyway, so I'm getting more honey from him, and I wanted to clean out what I had left in the bucket so I can give the bucket to him. And I found that it was kind of starting to crystallize because it was just a little bit cool in there. So anyway, I put it in jars, and I'm just melting it so that it's really, really, really slow. I don't want to kill all the good bacteria that's in here, but I wanted to melt it down so that it's nice and smooth and not crystally. And then you'll notice this one here. I found it in the laundry room, and it's actually from quite a few years ago, a bucket of honey that I had and was scooted to the back. So I don't know if you all know this. I'm going to stand up here again just one second. I sat down for a second, trying to stay off my feet as much as I can today so that I am physically resting as well as mentally. I wanted to talk to you about the honey. Honey has such amazing properties. It has antiviral, antibacterial properties, and honey doesn't ever go bad. Now, that being said, there is an exception, and I'll try to talk to you about that. Hopefully I'll remember as I'm just sitting here kind of winging it. But the reason for the dark honey is that as honey ages, it gets darker. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's older. Now, my kiddos would probably not believe me when I tell them that. So I'll probably just use that honey for seasoning, baked beans and things like that, where it's really not going to matter at all. But the taste is not affected. It's just a coloring that, again, as I said, happens when the honey gets older. So, talking about honey, that spoilage. Honey is something that they find in tombs, like the pharaoh tombs and things like that, that just doesn't ever go bad. It's like a perfect food. There is an exception to that, though. Not from the beekeeper that I spoke of earlier, because I've not had this from him, but I received some honey last year because there are beehives kept on Grandpa and Grandma's property, and the folks who keep those bees brought some honey to Grandpa and Grandma as a thank you for keeping the hives there. And it was not even, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months, and I noticed that the honey that I had was actually starting to ferment. And I'd never seen that before, and so I started doing a little research on it. That can happen if there's too much moisture in the honey. And so if it's, I am not an expert on honey, and I don't know the process. I don't know any of that. So I'm not pointing a finger at anybody or anything like that. But that can happen. So in that case, I just got rid of the honey. And some of you maybe out there are going to say, no, that was the best possible thing to eat. I have no idea. All I know is that it started to ferment, and as far as my knowledge goes, that is not what's supposed to happen. It's caused by too much moisture in the honey. So I disposed of it and just started back with my normal honey that I get locally here, and that has worked out fine. I've never ever had that again. If anybody knows more about that, just let us know. I'm going to hop up here and go back to adding some spices and herbs to the spaghetti sauce and get that going. And yeah, then I'll check back in. It smells wonderful in here today. Just to give you an idea of what process I do when I am getting tomatoes ready for to make sauce or whatever, I do have different ways of doing tomatoes depending on what I'm making with them. Now, because I'm doing spaghetti sauce with this, I am a-okay with leaving the skin on and all of that goodness in there. I take just the very core out, which you can see I really didn't take very much out, and then there was just a little bit. See if I can grab it here. Oh, you really want to see my dishwasher water, right? Okay, so I took just a little bit of the kind of yucky stuff off the outside, but that's it. And then I only have one hand today because I left the tripod, I'm afraid, in town. So I just kind of chop it up a little bit with a knife, not even a ton, and then into the roaster it goes. And sometimes I'll kind of squish it and mush it up a little bit, but really it doesn't need to be. And I just start cooking down some of that moisture out of there because I want a nice thick sauce. I showed you the recipe, and that's loosely what I'm going to do with it. Oh, you can see I even splattered some tomato. I will kind of dump things in. Basically, I'm going to fill up this roaster and start adding in the recipe ingredients, and then I will taste it and we'll see. Depending on this batch of tomatoes, each batch is going to have a different taste. So depending on what this batch tastes like will determine how much of each ingredient I put in. But I will start with what is on that recipe card, and then I'm going to go from there. So right now, I'm going to chop up some onion. So chopping up some onion, a lot of times when I'm canning, I end up going through all of my cutting boards and they're dirty or whatever. And so sometimes I just end up grabbing an ice cream bucket lid, and that works just fine. It keeps the juices and everything contained into one spot. So that's what I'm doing here. I wanted to show you that when I'm doing this spaghetti sauce, I'm not chopping it into small little pieces. I am literally just kind of hacking it up, because once this cooks down, I'm going to use my immersion blender to make it nice and smooth. So I'll just chop it up and go ahead and throw it into the roaster along with the other ingredients. I'll just start dumping them in. The recipe calls for green pepper or chopped celery. I actually like to do both. I have some green peppers that are in the jar. I'm going to have to pull them out of the cupboard that I had dehydrated, and so I'm probably just going to grab those, or I'll go to my stockpile in the freezer because I'm running low on them at the moment. I didn't get a ton of green peppers this year, but I like to do both celery and green pepper in this recipe. Well, I've grabbed a few ingredients here, and I'll show you how my dump method works. first of all, again, I loosely am following the recipe, but it is very loose. So I've got 30 pounds of tomatoes-ish. Maybe I'll probably add a few more because I want my roaster to be full. And then I've threw some onions in and garlic. I've got the chopped up celery, and now I'm going to add some black pepper in. I'm not really measuring it. Let me see what it calls for here. 2 teaspoons. I'm probably going to add more after I shut the camera off because I don't want you to have to just watch me doing that. But I would be adding the black pepper, green peppers. So I went out to the garden and I found the last few peppers. We're expecting snow later this week and some very cool temperatures. So even though these aren't very big, they sure are beautiful. And I'm going to go ahead and use them in the spaghetti sauce. It'll be just perfect. This one came off of a purple tomato plant. Now when you cook them up, they don't actually stay purple. And I'm telling you, I picked everything because in just a few days they're going to be shot. So there's really no growth time left for them. This is just what's left out in the garden. Just rinsing off a little dirt. Well, there's a little bug bite there, but I'll cut that out. The peppers were pretty good this year. My garden didn't get nearly as much attention as I would have liked after June because my work schedule just did not allow that. So again, I'm going to loosely chop up these peppers just like I did with the onions and toss them in. I'm going to use the immersion blender later so that I have just a really smooth texture. I wouldn't have to do that except that I have a couple kiddos who are a little bit picky about some of the ingredients if they're in chunks or chopped. So if I do it really smooth, they don't complain, which is good. I've got some beautiful, beautiful red peppers sitting over here that came from Stan and Joanne, and you hear me talk about them all the time. Just love my neighbors. They sent these over last week, actually, and I'm not going to use these in the spaghetti because I am eating them fresh. I love colored peppers, and they're at the point where they're still nice and firm. When they start to maybe lose a little bit of that, then I will chop them and put them in the freezer so that I can use them later on. I don't want to waste any of them, but for now they're still just doing great, and I love to be able to eat them fresh. So that is a huge treat for me. This is actually a crock-pot container, but I had it out, and so I started putting scraps in it, and I need to haul it out and dump it for the little piggers. They'll love that. All right, so the next thing, like I said, after the peppers, I'm just going to go ahead and dump some more items in. So let's see. It calls for 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. And again, I'm doing my dump method, and I'm doing more than 1/4 cup because this is going to end up being about a double recipe. I'm using olive oil. That's just what I like to use. Without the tripod, it's a little bit of a challenge to get all this done. All right, now this is kind of a blurry looking glass. It's clean, but in here I wish you could smell it. This is oregano. Smells so good. Okay, and that's out of my garden. This is the last bit of it from last year, actually. This year's I have not picked, and that will happen this week before it freezes, along with the other herbs. So I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle this oregano in here. Yum. And I just keep my herbs a lot of times in pint jars like this. They're easy for me to store up in the cupboard. And then the Parmesan cheese lids work great because you can open them up and either measure or sprinkle, of course, from the other side. I knew I was going to use all of it, and I wanted to show it to you in the jar, so I just took it off. I'm going to go ahead and use some Himalayan pink salt instead of regular table salt. You can use whatever works for you, whatever you want to do. And then I do have one child who has been growling about mushrooms, so I'm not going to put mushrooms in this time. I'm just going to go ahead and leave them out. And then we need a little bit of brown sugar. Now, not everybody likes that probably in their spaghetti sauce, but we do. We like just a touch of it to take away the bitterness. We have a couple kiddos that don't really like tomatoes, and so taking away the bitterness is very helpful. This recipe calls for 1/4 of a cup, and again, I'm going to dump, even with the phone, if you can see that. So closer to 1/2 cup, I would say. But like I said, you may not, maybe more than that. You might not want yours that sweet. I am, because that's what fits my family. I have this coffee can, and it's one of my most prized possessions. The lid, I dropped it on the floor actually. The lid has been replaced a couple times. But the coffee can came from my grandma, and she's still living, and oh my gosh, there's no way I could tell you how much I love her, my Grandma Betty. But she had brought me this one day when we were first married, and she said, you need something to keep your brown sugar in. And so sure enough, that's what I use it for. I have used it for that ever since. And with the plastic lid, it keeps the brown sugar just absolutely perfect. It is an absolute essential part of my kitchen, and I would love to hear if you have things like that too. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get the peppers chopped up in here, and then we're going to let it cook for a while. So all of the ingredients have been added in. I went ahead and chopped up some more tomatoes to fill up my roaster, and I'm just going to let this cook away. I will let it get good and hot all the way through, and then I will take the lid and just sit it off at an angle so that moisture will evaporate out. But for right now, I'm going to let it get nice and hot. And as you can see, I did not chop the peppers fine. I just chopped them up just like I did with the onions, and everything else is in there down in the bottom. I'm just going to let it cook, and then again, as I've mentioned, using the immersion blender, I will blend all of it up, skins and all, so that I have a nice thick paste, and that will work great. When we get to that point, then I'll be ready to jar it up, and we'll go ahead and use the pressure canner to preserve it. This roaster was one that I found at a Goodwill or consignment kind of store years ago, and so it doesn't probably look as nice as some of them, but boy does it work well. I'm going to check on the honey now. As you can see, the honey that I started with is nice and clear. There's no crystallization in that at all, and these that I had put in after that are still warming up. Like I said, I'm doing it nice and slow. I don't want to ruin all that goodness that naturally comes in the honey. So that's how that's coming along, absolutely beautifully. Good morning, everyone. I am back at my spaghetti sauce. I have started to blend it up with my immersion blender. I just love this thing. It works great for getting rid of the chunks, and that's what I need to do for my kiddos. I did take out the plastic liner, and that worked fabulous because I don't have anything stuck to my roaster, so cleanup will be super easy. But I was afraid I would get it caught when I did this portion. So anyway, I'm just finishing up getting all the chunks out of it. If it were up to me, I would leave the chunks in it and just make them a little bit smaller. But like I said yesterday when I was working on this, I a couple finicky kiddos, and so I need to, yep, that looks good. Oh, there's one little, there I can feel it, an onion, but otherwise, I think we've got it. That looks good. So what I'm going to do next then is go ahead and jar this up and run it through the pressure canner, because that's what you would need to do for spaghetti sauce. And then they will be ready for the shelf. So I hope everybody has a great day. Hey, before I sign off, I want to tell you that when I watched the video last night of what I had shot yesterday for making the spaghetti sauce, that I realized that I had not put any Parmesan cheese in it. And I usually put a full container of Parmesan in each batch that is like this size, a roaster size. We just really love the flavor of that. And it's what our family prefers. So I'm not sure why it wasn't on the recipe card. My daughters and I at one point had copied some recipes, and then they were able to take those with. So I'm guessing that probably I got a copied recipe and it had been accidentally left off. But in my recipe, I do use, like I said, a full container of Parmesan cheese goes into that roaster as I'm cooking it. And so I did add it in there, but I had forgot to mention it on the video. So I'm going to sign off for today and get these jars filled and into my pressure canner and get that going. I've got lots to do today. We're expecting snow and obviously cold temperatures and snow the end of the week, and so I've got some more things to pick in the garden. I will try to video to share that with you as much as I can, and I hope that you have a blessed day. Please remember to share this video, like or subscribe to our channel, and share it with your friends. Have a great day. All right, so jarring up the spaghetti sauce. My friend Brooke, who I haven't seen for a while, but I get to talk to her online, gave me a beautiful set of stainless steel funnels. Whoops, I found a piece of celery in there. I'll have to get rid of that. Anyway, the sauce tastes amazing. It tastes nice and fresh, and you can just taste the vegetables in it. It's really wonderful. Some of you are probably wondering, I don't always use traditional canning jars. I use, you know, some of the old Mayo Miracle Whip jars as well. I really have not had a problem with them. So I'm just going to continue to do this until all of my sauce is jarred up. All right, well, the spaghetti sauce yielded 13.5 quarts. What I'm doing right now is wiping. Please forgive my mess. I've got splatters, I have a dirty toaster, you name it. Life is sometimes messy. But right now I am just wiping the rims with a paper towel. You could use a washcloth, of course, but I grabbed a paper towel just to make sure it's nice and clean, and I'm wiping the rim of each jar real carefully with vinegar. That'll just make sure there's no residue on there. Like I can see right here, there's just a tiny bit. We'll want to make sure that's off. And then when that happens, I go ahead and rotate the washcloth, because I want to make sure that each jar is totally clean. Now these are not my best jars by any means. It's that time of year where I am grabbing whatever's available. Oh, there's a little more on the outside, so we'll rotate that again. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my jar lids on. This video really is not a how-to of making spaghetti sauce, but I just want to show you a little bit of what I'm doing. Now this one here that's partially full, I'm actually going to stick it in the fridge because I'm going to make more spaghetti sauce today. I've got lots more tomatoes to work on, which is awesome. And our water here little side note, our water here tends to be a little bit limey, and so if I don't really tackle that, they end up a little cloudy. Anyway, we will have more spaghetti sauce later today is what I was getting at. And so I'll just go ahead and fill that, and we'll probably eat spaghetti for supper. That will work great. In the meantime, I'm going to put the lids on these beautiful jars and get them in the pressure canner.